Welcome to War of the Stars, a Star Wars podcast, coming to you every week from deep within the Outer Rim, far beyond the watchful ice of the Galactic Empire. Join your hosts, John Mark Tolley, Garrett K. Jones, and Brian Karasik, as they discuss the various facets of the saga's lore, characters, review the films, and discuss every tidbit of news coming out of Lucasfilm. And remember, this isn't just my Star Wars, this isn't just your Star Wars, this is our Star Wars. Welcome to War of the Stars, a Star Wars podcast, coming to you every week from deep within the Outer Rim, far beyond the watch.
That was my bad. I forgot to unloop it. Can you imagine just like the next 5 minutes of that? Because I can.
Well, that'd be a good measurement of the audience, is to just let that run for 45 minutes and then post it. See who says anything.
You know what? I'm almost tempted to do that.
I've been revamping some of my workplace's reporting documents, and discovered that we have been reporting a data point incorrectly for the last 2.5 years, to the tune of it is a measurement of days, and 15 would be a bad rating. And we have been reporting, again, for 2.5 years, one of those data points to be in the 900 or greater.
Oh my gosh.
I talked to my team. I was like, so we're reporting this data point as being 1,008 days turnaround time since June. 1,008 days from June of 22 is next month. Like, that couldn't possibly be right? So anyway, so the question is, here's how we fix it. And it was just reporting. We were just reporting the wrong data point in the software. So do they want the data point we're reporting and we've just labeled it wrong? Or have we labeled it correctly? We want the data point. And is anybody looking? I had to ask, is this a data point we really need to be reporting? Because we have been reporting it off by a factor of 100 for 2.5 years, and nobody's had anything to say about it. So might not be necessary information, but I'm sure in your familiar corporate America, they're like, oh, well, this is the way it's always been done, so this is the way we continue to do it.
Hey, I guess it ain't broke.
I got my Palpatine fig pin.
That looks great, man.
I've been looking for him for a long time.
Did you 3D print that display?
No, sorry, I did. Yeah, I need to make it bigger. I underestimated how many pins I have. But yeah, these are all my Palpatine pins and one Imperial copy.
I like that.
And for the fangers out there, I don't know if you'll recognize this icon.
Legion of Doom?
That's the clan symbol of Cleanse Jimasei from Vampire the Masquerade.
Oh, I'm not that familiar with Vampire the Masquerade.
A bunch of pale nerds out there are clapping for me right now. But carry on. What are we talking about tonight?
Well, for those of you just joining us, I'm Garrett Jones, and I've got always I can't say always because you were out sick last week.
I missed a couple.
Yeah, Brian Karasik. We are actually down on John Mark Tolley this week because he has caught whatever's been floating around the continent. So hopefully he's getting the rest and recuperation that he needs to continue on. Thankfully, today was a holiday for him, and then tomorrow is his usual day off. So hopefully he's getting as much rest as possible. This week, we're talking about the unanswered questions of the Star Wars universe.
Now, I have not seen this list, Garrett, but I'm going to put $1 down that one of those questions pertains to Darth Bane at the moment of his death.
Let me go through, because I'll be popping this up on screen here in just a moment.
You heard it here first, folks.
Yep. So I'm going to say no, not a single one of these things has anything to do with Darth Bane, because this is all just based on. This is all just based on the movies, as far as what I can tell. So it's not delving into the depths of the Disney Plus series, nor is it delving into the comics or the graphic novels or the.
Okay, fair enough.
This is just strictly film. So I think that'll make it a little bit easier. But I'm sure there's going to be at some point an opportunity for you to share some questions that you might have. Because I'm always eager to see what you've got to say. So,
well, I'm always eager to say it.
Of course you are. Wouldn't have you any other way, man. So our first question, and I correct me if I'm wrong, but this doesn't feel like it's a really necessary question, but is, what is Yoda's species?
Fair enough. That is indeed unanswered.
Yeah, and it's like I said, it feels kind of an unnecessary one because, like, who cares?
Yeah, in a world where Wilro Hood has 7 pages of backstory, I can see why people would be interested in Yoda's species. We've only seen 3 of that species on screen that I'm aware of: Yoda, and of course Yaddle, and now Grogu.
Yes,
Yaddle got a lot more treatment in the EU. We barely have a word of her in the new canon, but she actually had a fairly dark history in the EU. Yes. Are you familiar with Yaddle's backstory? You must be. It's a comic book.
I'm not, because like most of the graphic novels and comic books that I've focused on were either Clone Wars related or Legacy related. Very little of it had anything to do with Yaddle personally. And so if there was something in one of the Dark Horse Clone Wars books, I may have missed it, or I just don't remember it. I know that Yaddle did she actually got a lot of screen time in Tales of the Jedi.
Yes.
So
she was. Let me see where we touch on this. Click the Tarko.
Don't worry, folks. There's no dead air. We're just
sorry. Yeah. All right. So Yaddle was. I don't have the details of it here, and I'm not going to make you watch me look it up. But Yaddle was imprisoned for a long time, and
does it say for what?
She was captured and imprisoned in a chamber deep underground by Chulak. Here, this is just in legend, so no one knows on the wrong page. She was captured and imprisoned in a chamber deep underground and subjected to various forms of torture. However, the green-skinned Padawan did not give in to the torture, refusing to tell him when the next Jedi would arrive. Let's see. Her captor decided he'd had enough and left her in a pit. So he just left her there. Many decades of isolation.
Oh, that doesn't sound like fun.
Yeah, it's really a great topic for a comic book. But anyway, so she was the guy who had imprisoned her son freed her. Anyway, yeah, so pretty rough. She was imprisoned in a pit underground for decades, and then was awarded Jedi Masterhood basically because she didn't die as a result. Like this recollection, but more to the point. Does it matter? I'd be interested to know, but I feel like we may have answered too many questions in Star Wars fandom. Questions I didn't need answered, like how did Darth Vader become Darth Vader? I didn't so much need to know that if I had to put up with Episode 2 to learn it.
You know what? Because I remembered, like when I was first starting off, playing the Star Wars RPG, the West End games. Like there were so many conflicting things that were popping up. Some of them were fan theories, others were like parts of stories about Vader. And like one of the ongoing theories, especially for Vader and for Palpatine, is that they became disfigured because of their use of the dark side, that it had a corrupting influence on their physical forms.
I think there's a correlation causation issue there.
Right. But I mean, but the fact is like, I think what made Vader more terrifying is the fact that nobody knew his origin. And that, I mean, yeah, okay, great. He's like that line that Obi-Wan says of, he's more machine now than man. That says a lot about the character. Like he's lost his humanity.
Was it Uncle Owen said that?
Nope.
Oh.
He's more machine now than man, twisted and evil.
I've misremembered that all my life. All right, carry on.
Dude. It's another week in a row where I may have to set some bets because Mark tried to question my knowledge of movie quotes last week and almost died.
Oh, I didn't mean to question whether or not you were right. I was just expressing my own mistake. I know better.
All right. So question number 2. What did Finn want to tell Rey? Like, apparently there was something he was supposed to say between the 3 sequel films. And
I mean, it's fairly evident that Finn has romantic feelings for Rey.
Really? Was that it?
That's what I have always assumed, is he wanted to tell her how you do it.
Yeah, well, I
or words to that effect.
She was the first woman he got to see without stormtrooper armor on. Her not wearing
it. We don't see a lot of female stormtroopers in the First Order. They are out there, though, but I always like to think that Finn and Phasma really should have ended up together. I think they were just really she's more willing to break the rules than he is when it comes down to it. When I first watched The Force Awakens, my question was, how could Phasma betray the First Order so quickly? Right, like she just immediately shut down the shields, and like they didn't even make them torture her a little bit. And then once I read the Phasma novel and the Phasma graphic novel, I'm like, I can't believe it took her so long to betray the First Order. She's unbelievably callous.
I'm gonna have to check out those books because like I just chalked it up to bad writing. And now there's a couple of pieces of literature out there that completely retcon the crappy writing. I kind of want to check them out.
Spoiler alert for some other questionable writing, but Phasma does kill her crippled brother as a means of getting to the First Order, getting off her planet.
Wow.
And this is a desert planet where the radiation of the sun is so dangerous that it's been a while, but there is a specific like ointment that they use to protect themselves from the sun's rays, which is made of the ground up people in their tribe.
That just sounds awful.
Yeah, they're savages. Phasma does not come from a high-tech planet. So, but yeah, I mean, I don't know if that's unanswered so much as just uninteresting, but I'm pretty sure it was something to the effect of, why don't let's run away from all this and
well, there's a lot of speculation from fans that think that he was trying to admit that he was force sensitive, but it's like if he was force sensitive, wouldn't she have sensed it? Being that she is force sensitive.
I don't know. Her powers are so come and go as far as omnipotent here and unusable there, so it's hard to say. I think that'd be more interesting than I Love You. If he
was force sensitive, then why wouldn't someone as skilled as Kylo Ren sense it?
Yes, that would be. All the
like I mean, they encountered each other a few times.
We assume that Kylo whips his head around to look at Finn because he senses Finn's hesitancy, but that could just as easily, it's not outright spoken why, and he could just as easily have detected a twinge of the Force. But you know what? I don't care for a certain aspect of the fandom's insistence that anybody who's good at anything is because of the Force. Right, like I've seen people like, well, Han Solo is force sensitive because he's such a good pilot. Boba Fett's force sensitive because he's such a good bounty hunter. Like sometimes people are just good. I think it makes it more common. So I would have liked to have seen Finn.
But to quote one of my favorite Star Wars commentators, we never actually see Boba Fett be good at bounty hunting. So
well. That's
I don't
true.
think the Force is with him.
No, I don't think so either. And honestly, it just makes it common in a very video gamey way. Like there was a Star Wars MMO for a long time that didn't have any Jedi in it.
Yeah.
And then I forget which one was it. Was it the Old Republic or I forget? But they introduced Jedi where you could undergo a quest line and discover you were Force sensitive. But the quest line was so forbiddingly difficult that nobody could do it, and so the audience complained, and so the game designers made it easier, and all of a sudden everybody's a Jedi in a time period where canonically there aren't any. So I think that sort of thing, if everybody's good because it's the Force and the Force is not a special thing, it just becomes dumb.
Okay. I think that's
Like,
pretty fair.
I think that The Boys would be a less interesting story if everybody was super. Have you ever read? There's a comic book called PS238. Have you ever seen it?
I've heard of it and never read it.
It's such a great idea. Disney stole the idea twice. It's about a grade school where superhero children are taught by retired superheroes. So essentially, if the Avengers retired and opened up a school and taught the children of their allies and their enemies, like there's several villains children that's in here.
So essentially, it's Sky High.
Yes, that's one of the times that they stole the idea. It's
Gotcha.
that exactly. But as in Sky High, the main protagonist of the story is the son of the two most powerful superheroes on Earth, and he does not have any powers. And he is sent to this school to protect himself because his parents kept endangering his life to try to trigger his powers. They're like, well, if we throw him off this skyscraper, surely his powers will manifest. If we throw him into orbit, surely the sun's radiation will trigger his powers. He was
great parenting.
Right. Well, they're invulnerable to everything. They have a skewed sense. So I think my answer to Finn's is I did not remember that was even a thing, and it did not dent my attention span in the slightest. And if he was confessing he was force sensitive, I don't know how he would know it or how he would phrase it. I think we got to go with, specifically for that movie, that series. I think we got to go with the most obvious answer is he was going to profess his undying love to her and try to take her away from him.
That sounds about right. So question number 8, and this is one that I've been curious about only because it deliberately goes unanswered. How did Maz Kanata get the Skywalker lightsaber?
Yeah, that is unanswered, and that I am interested in. I'd really like to see how that happened.
Because this is like, so these questions are coming from movieweb.com, and this is the little blurb that they put under this particular question. Maz Kanata, as played by Lupito Nyong'o, is introduced in The Force Awakens, it's not a Force, it's The Force, as a sort of stand-in for Yoda, an ancient extraterrestrial who's wiser than everyone else despite her goofy appearance. After studying Rey and sensing her connection to the Force, which, how does she do that? She's got no known Force powers. Maz hands Rey Luke Skywalker's lightsaber, the original blue saber that Luke lost, along with his hand on Cloud City during his first duel with Darth Vader. How the heck did Maz find it and come to possess it? To which she says, a good question for another time.
It's still another time.
We're still waiting for the right time for Maz to answer this question. I think it wouldn't be up to Maz to answer this question. This is one of those questions where I feel like, and this just goes to my absolute hatred for J.J. Abrams as a filmmaker. I want to tie him up and beat him with his own shoes until he comes up with a decent enough answer. Because this is the guy who does like the whole mystery box crap. He's like, what, it's like the quintessential what's in the box without it being Gwyneth Paltrow's head. And he asks this really good question. Well, yeah, okay, it's a great question. Why aren't you answering it? There should be something there. And it never gets explored. It never gets touched on.
Abrams seems like the kind of director to smile and say, but you're still talking about it.
I don't care if I'm still talking about it. I want an answer to it. You pose a question. You need to answer.
Just totally off the cuff, this isn't anything I've given any thought to. I would like to see that story told, but in the meantime, I'm going to go ahead and say that Luke's lightsaber has killed so many people, and the Skywalker bloodline has killed so many people, starting with Anakin, that that lightsaber is kind of like the One Ring of Star Wars. It's just taken on a life of its own, and it moves itself around.
Yeah, I'm not buying it.
All right.
And here's the reason why this question bugs me so much is, are you familiar with the term Chekhov's gun?
Yes.
Okay.
I was a theater major. Come on.
Okay, just making sure.
Yeah.
For those of you who are not theater majors or big fans of good storytelling, basically Anton Chekhov was a playwright from Russia, and he developed this philosophy when it came to storytelling, that if you introduce something as an element in the story, a crucial element, or in this case, reintroducing a lightsaber that was thought to have gone missing decades before, there needs to be an answer for it and an explanation before the end of the story. Or if you're introducing something that needs to be used, it needs to be used by the end of the story. In this case, the lightsaber doubles for both of those because the question gets asked, but it never gets answered, and it gets used the way it was supposed to, which is fine, but we're still waiting on the answer. It should have been answered.
Yep. It's referred to as Chekhov's gun while we're filling in the blanks, as the theater bumper sticker version of that is, if you introduce a gun in Act 1, it has to go off in Act 3.
Exactly.
It's as axiomatic as in a movie, if a woman in her mid-20s throws up, she is pregnant. there is no other reason for it.
That's not true. It's called anorexia.
Fair enough. But then it's a very special episode of the TV show. Well, what's our next one? Because I don't think we're gonna get anywhere answering the Maz Kanata question. Although before we move on, what did you think of Maz as a character? I thought she was very interestingly done.
She was an interesting character, but we don't get enough about her. Like,
true.
Like, what is the history? Like, why is she there? It doesn't make any sense. Like with Lando, when we were talking about Lando last week, we get a little bit of that history when he's introduced by name by Han, when he's checking out different places where he and Leia and everybody else can hide. But we get nothing about Maz, only that she knows Han and has some kind of history with him and has a crush on a Wookiee.
Yeah.
Beyond that, we get nothing.
I sense your anger.
Not
okay,
anger, or just frustration, I guess. I don't know.
Feel your frustration. So,
God,
what's our next one?
Okay, our next question is, why didn't Obi-Wan hide Luke better?
I've got a whole bit about that where I do drunk Palpatine and I drunk dial people, and that's one of the main bits I do is I call up Kenobi and I say, Kenobi, I just want to ask you, what were you thinking, hiding that boy on Tatooine, is Vader's home planet, with his only living relatives? You didn't even change his last name. I mean, honestly, it's insulting, is what it is. He finds that child in a week, maybe a month. Is not terribly bright.
Am I
right,
late?
he's here.
Hey, Mark.
I didn't think we were I thought it was 8 when we were recording. 8
I
months.
hadn't heard from you. Like,
What?
I asked if we were. I asked if we were still on. And I hadn't heard.
Sorry, sorry. I have a sick kid, so that's.
I thought you were the sick one.
I was. Now my daughter's sick.
Well, you look great. I thought you were at home lying in bed. You look like you got a fresh haircut and everything.
I just took a shower, so.
Fair enough. Yes.
Wow.
Same
Sorry,
here.
guys.
Once a month, whether I need it or not.
What did I miss?
Man? Well, we just went through the first 4 questions about that are unanswered. The first one was, what is Yoda's species, which we both decided was completely unnecessary. The second one was, what did Finn want to tell Rey? And we both concluded that he probably just wanted to confess his undying love to Rey.
Mm-hmm.
Basically, he was a stand-in for Kathleen Kennedy's voice.
Okay.
And then the last one we just answered was, how did Maz Kanata get the Skywalker lightsaber? And then the one we just asked, which you stepped in on, was, why didn't Obi-Wan hide Luke better? So, Mark, since you're here, I'd like to know, why didn't Obi-Wan Kenobi hide Luke a little bit more?
He didn't even change the last name. He parked it with Vader's only relatives on Vader's home planet.
Only thing I can think of is I think maybe it was the whole hide in plain sight. Like, the last place Vader would want to look or even think about looking would be Tatooine, because he has so much hatred for Tatooine, so much animosity towards that place because of what it represents to him, like what he lost there.
There was a canon source that said much to that effect. I think it was in one of the Vader comics that Vader just would had sworn to never return to Tatooine or Naboo.
Yeah.
Just too much. He does go back to Naboo later on, but regardless, I think that's probably a good point, Mark. Vader would not want to go to Tatooine.
Yeah.
Much less
And,
drop down. Hey, so how have you been?
Obi-Wan, knowing, the person who, other than Padme, probably the person who knew Anakin better than anyone would have been Obi-Wan. And he would have known that this place holds certain memories, and therefore putting someone on Tatooine,
it's Vader's blind spot.
Was Vader's blind spot. Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
I think you're right, but I do think we're doing an awful lot of work for the movies to come to that conclusion.
Yeah. Well,
it's not, but in this case, it's fun work, not so much the kind of fun, not so much the kind of work that we had to do with some of our previous questions.
Yeah.
So, okay. I'm okay with either of those answers. The blind spot works, I guess. All right. Next question. Why did Luke leave behind a map to his location?
Because he wanted to be found secretly.
Yeah. Is that unanswered? That seems.
I mean,
he didn't make it super easy, but you have to have R2 on your side to make it work. And I think Luke wanted to put a mechanism in place where he could be located by people who had access to R2-D2, knowing that R2-D2 is the best judge of character in the galaxy.
Yeah.
So if R2-D2 is willing to help you find Luke, then Luke is probably willing to be found by you.
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of a weird thing because he exiled himself. So if he I know for a fact that if I want people to find me, I'll tell them where I'm going to go. Yeah. If in the event that I don't want people to find me, I'm not going to say a word about where I'm going. I'm just going to up and leave.
I think it'd be funny if Luke's elaborately hidden map led to someplace else. Because if I don't want to, I will tell people I'll tell people I'm going somewhere else.
That would have been a Mark Hamill level troll.
Yeah. Yes, it would have been.
I'm sure you guys saw this, but at one point they were filming The Force Awakens, and everybody was going to the UK, and there were paparazzi pictures of Daisy and Adam getting off the plane, and they're both big hat, big sunglasses, big dark coat wrapped around them, right? Just don't look at me, don't look at me, don't look at me. And then Hamill gets off the plane. He's wearing a T-shirt that says Jedi Master. He's like, ah. I think that Luke's the only living Jedi that Luke has encountered. Both did the same thing he did. Both of them went into exile on a remote planet to hide out after what they perceived as a failure.
Yeah.
So if no one had been able to find Obi-Wan, Luke would never have never known there were Jedi. If no one had been able to find Yoda, Luke would never have been trained as a Jedi. So I think Luke, even if it's unconsciously, but I think it was intentional. Luke had to leave a way to be found if there was someone who needed to find him, and call it putting your faith in the Force. If the Force brings someone to me, I think that never mind, that breaks down a little bit because Rey shows up and he's kind of a jerk to her. But at any rate, I think
isn't that the Jedi way? I mean, wasn't in a sort of a way Yoda kind of a jerk to Luke when Luke first found him?
Yeah, but
not Kenobi. I think it's funny.
He told him, "Nope, I'm not going to train you."
I made a meme about this with Luke standing in the cave and saying it's time for the Jedi to end, and then panel down as Palpatine saying, "Oh, sure, but when I say it, everybody makes a big thing about it." I think it's a good question, and when I'm just speculating, but that's my thought on it. Is Luke wanted to be able to be found if it was a necessity, and he may have disagreed about whether it was a necessity, but no, it's an interesting hero that doesn't like the call to duty.
I think you've got a good point on that one. Okay. The next one goes old school. And I mean OG old school. why did Obi-Wan let Darth Vader kill him? For me, I think this is kind of an obvious one. Like, it doesn't feel unanswered for me. Like, it's like he did it to buy time for Luke and Leia and Han to get off the Death Star. Like, I thought that was pretty obvious.
Yeah.
Am I wrong in that?
I don't think so.
I think it kind of gives Vader a disservice to say that Kenobi let him win. Is that a canonical take on that? I haven't.
Well, I mean, he does lift his saber and doesn't do anything to defend himself.
Oh yeah, okay, you're right.
But to be fair though, at that point, he is surrendering himself to the Force, and at that point he becomes one with it. So he's not technically he's dead, but he's surrendered his corporeal form for his spirit to transcend. So
Yeah, Vader. I mean, if you watch that fight, I mean, Obi-Wan wasn't trying. I mean, he wasn't putting his full effort into that fight.
Yeah,
he was just.
Some of that can be put down to the fact that they hadn't really perfected the lightsaber.
This is true. But if you look at it from
don't hit it too hard or the stick will break.
Yeah.
But no, I think that's stepping out of the meta appreciation of the making of. I think that's right. It had been decades since Kenobi fought anybody other than Ponda Baba with a lightsaber.
Yeah.
Very true.
I do like the idea that obviously Kenobi was distracting Vader so the others could get away, but I think Kenobi died feeling that he had paid a debt. He essentially. I'm not saying he did this, but I imagine on some level Kenobi feels that he killed Anakin and made way for Vader. Kenobi was tortured for his entire time on Tatooine by the existence of Darth Vader, which he saw as his own failure. It wasn't, even as a dark side aficionado like myself, I don't think Kenobi should be held accountable for that, but you can't tell Kenobi that. He had to feel responsible. So I think on one level he was serving as a distraction, but on the other hand, he was paying a debt.
I think you might be right. I think he could have been paying a debt from a certain point of view.
I see what you did there.
Thank you. I appreciate that. No, I think it's nothing more than what it is on the surface. That he simply was buying time, because like if you notice, like he's sitting there pairing with Vader all these times. They're moving around that space, and he's keeping it contained to the point where like he draws a crowd of onlooking stormtroopers, and the stormtroopers are like, dude, this is cool. We never get to see anything like this.
Right.
We try to do any kind of challenge, we all miss, and so they're distracted. The Falcon is unguarded, and these three humans and a walking shag carpet pass right behind them. They don't even hear a thing.
It's a little bit of a Scooby-Doo moment there with the
very Scooby-Doo.
Which reminds me, have you seen there's a video meme of if stormtroopers could shoot accurately, and it starts with the whole scene of Luke and Leia swinging across, and the stormtroopers actually manage to shoot them as they're swinging across the cabin in the first Death Star, and then they shoot Obi-Wan.
Not for the first time, I'm going to espouse my theory that Luke Skywalker's truest and most powerful aspect of the Force is that nobody who looks at him ever seriously wants to kill him. It's not that stormtroopers are bad at shooting people; they're good at shooting anybody else. But throughout the saga, the only people who credibly try to kill Luke Skywalker are Ewoks and Jabba the Hutt. Everybody else wants him to join their team.
Plot armor. I think there's something
powerful
plot armor around too.
Okay. The next question takes us towards our conversation next week about our next week's episode. But how does Leia remember Padme while Luke doesn't? This is a Return of the Jedi reference.
I think there's two answers to that. In canon, Leia remembers Padme because Lucas had not yet written the prequel trilogy, despite his years of pretending that he had. And so in his mind, Leia had a few years of childhood with Padme before Padme died.
I
think
he sits on a throne of lies.
Yes, I think the evidence that Lucas was making up as he went along is pretty well stacked up. No combination of English words could convince me that Lucas had the whole thing planned out from the get-go. Nobody ever says the word Padawan in the original trilogy. We never hear about Qui-Gon Jinn in the original trilogy.
Mm-hmm.
It's just not. It's not feasible. But which is not to be a complaint. It's just I wish that George didn't apply his prodigious storytelling skills to his own life as well as he did to his movies. But that said, canonically, I think that we're meant to believe that Leia had more of an emotional connection to Padme, and she has that feeling through the dialogue that Carrie delivers in Return of the Jedi could be attributed to Force sensations, like genetic memory, if you will.
Well, and you know what? The article here on MovieWeb says some fans point to Leia's connection with the Force to explain this. But Luke is a Jedi and is undoubtedly more powerful with the Force than his sister. Shouldn't he be able to conjure up the same feelings and images about Padme as Leia did?
We don't know that he's more powerful than her. He's more trained than her.
Yeah.
Good point.
She had no patience for it, and I think anybody who has any appreciation of Leia Organa as a character would agree that she is much more likely to pick up a blaster and start shooting rather than ponder the place of blaster in the universe.
Yes, whether it's her own people or the enemy, she is very willing to pick up a blaster and start shooting.
Right there. So yeah, I wouldn't say that necessarily she was more powerful in the Force, but that as a developing fetus, she was probably more in tune with Leia. And in the Bloodlines book, we read about Leia communing with Kylo Ren in the. So there's perhaps retcon, but at any rate, within canon, we have documented evidence that a pregnant Force user can have essentially emotional conversations with their own child. And that brings me. I always liked the idea.
That feels very Dune.
Yeah, people often would say, I don't get involved in these conversations as much anymore, but people would often say when the sequel trilogies were on the screen and current, I'd see conversations about whether or not Jedi can have children, because they're forbidden attachments, and that was always the stance I saw people take was like, well, they're forbidden attachments, but that doesn't mean they couldn't have children. So they could have a child, but then just abandon it, like after.
That's what Ki-Adi-Mundi did. His family was in such disarray that he was allowed, like every couple of years, to go and sire a couple hundred bastards.
Everybody's got to do what they can to do their part. We're all pulling our oars the best way we can. But anyway, that's a bit far off topic anyway. But I think that's where I landed on that, is that Leia and Padme had more of a connection in the womb.
So I do have one unanswered question that I think needs very, very important. You actually reminded me of it. It's from the prequel trilogy. What about the droid attack on the Wookiees?
Well, to be fair, there is a response to this. And I just saw a meme on this, is that had Ki-Adi-Mundi not brought up that topic, Yoda would not have gone to Kashyyyk.
Mm-hmm.
He would have stayed on Coruscant, and when Anakin brought the attention of Palpatine's history to the Jedi Council, it wouldn't have been Mace Windu who handled it. It would have been Yoda, who probably would have handled it 1,000 times better.
Don't get me started. I think I hadn't thought of it that way. That's a very good point. Ki-Adi-Mundi, tool of the dark side.
Yes.
He was just a tool.
I'm gonna say Ki-Adi-Mundi is the Mac Tonight character. Do you guys remember Mac Tonight?
Yes.
Okay. There's just I can't not see it. I'm the generation I grew up singing that song, and oh, there he is.
God, those late '80s commercials were great.
Yeah. If Jackson is Bucky O'Hara, then Ki-Adi-Mundi is definitely Mac Tonight.
I love it. All right. So the next question: why didn't Anakin's body vanish when he died? Because the article says here, when Obi-Wan is killed by Vader, his body vanishes into thin air as he becomes one with the Force. This correlates to a skill that allows a Jedi to become a Force ghost in the afterlife. We see this happen again when Yoda passes away in Return of the Jedi and when Luke himself dies in The Last Jedi. But when Anakin perishes in Return of the Jedi, his body doesn't vanish. Luke seemingly brings it back with him to Endor and burns Anakin's body inside his armor.
Good question. I think, again, two answers. Metatextually, it was because it's a better image to burn Vader on a pyre. But within canon, I think that Vader's body was so ravaged by the dark side that all that was good in him was left in his spirit. The part of Vader that became one with the Force was not tangible.
And could that lead to another possible question of why? Now I know that in the remakes, the original version, it was older Anakin who shows up at the end, but it's new Anakin. So could you make that for a new canonical, that very reason that it was his soul that was still pure, his spirit, and so that's why we see the younger Anakin instead of the older Anakin, because that was the last version.
Two answers.
Of him that was still pure.
I think that was just Lucas couldn't keep his fingerprints off that. He's like, let's make something different.
Well, we know that. Yeah.
But yeah.
So,
no, I think I like your take on what I said. That's good.
But here's the question then. What about Qui-Gon? Qui-Gon is the Jedi that taught Yoda and then subsequently Obi-Wan how to do this.
Mm-hmm.
At no point did Anakin ever learn how to do this. But here's the funny thing is that Qui-Gon figured out how to become one with the Force and become a Force ghost. It took him a while to figure it out and to become not corporeal, but at least visible. But his body does not become one with the Force. He dies, and his body is burned on Naboo.
This is true.
So
I think,
how does this work? What's the rule?
I don't know. I mean, that's now. I do have a
not a causation. Again, I think that obviously you don't have to vanish to become one with the Force, because nobody could say Qui-Gon was not in touch with the Force. Like,
oh no. I do have one answer for Anakin. Anakin not having learned that. There's, I believe it's either a short story or part of a novel or something like that. Maybe it might have been a comic that there's a part that takes place right after Anakin's death. And it's in the Force where he's just died and he hears the voice of Obi-Wan, and Obi-Wan kind of guides him through, like, okay, this is the afterlife. This is kind of guides him through of how to become. And isn't there like now in the original, in what's now Legends, there was the idea that the corporeal form that you could take as a Force ghost was something that was temporary, that eventually that connection with the living would dissipate and you would become fully one with the Force, and that you would kind of go into the ether. But that seems to have changed with the new canon.
Yeah, I don't know. This is one of those things where
I have my research.
George Lucas on the show.
He's a big fan of the show.
Yeah. George, if you're listening, open.
Hey, George, I live literally 2 hours from Modesto, your hometown.
Did I ever tell you guys I'm Facebook friends with James Luceno?
With who?
James Luceno, the author of Darth Plagueis.
Oh, no.
Oh, no.
How'd you get that?
Well, I sent him a friend request, and I'm friends with 2 other Star Wars novelists, and so I got I the
I am too.
What's funny
friends.
Is it John Jackson Miller? Because he's awesome.
Yeah,
Oh,
John Jackson Miller.
Yeah, he has responded to a couple of things that I've posted.
I interviewed him on my last podcast twice.
Miller authored that Batman '89 novel Resurrection, which I just read at the tail end of last year, and dude, so good. It was so good.
I came across his name with Lost Tribes of the Sith, and I'm like, oh, this is great. This is like, and I'm proud to say, as I read it, I was like, this is like Lord of the Rings and Star Wars, and he refers to it as such.
Yeah.
But anyway,
got a Star Wars book coming out soon.
Yeah. The funny
He's
thing
also a good
about
Star Trek writer.
Oh yeah, he definitely is.
Yeah.
For me, the funniest thing about my friendship with James Luceno is as soon as he approved my friend request, I sent him a multiple paragraph fanboy wave of how much I enjoyed Darth Plagueis, and the novel really inspired me to get into cosplay and voice acting, and just loved it. And thanks so much for what you do. And I will periodically share a screenshot of that message, of that Facebook conversation, as evidence of my friendship with James Luceno, because nothing says close friends like an 8 years unread Facebook message. I said it in 2016. He still hasn't read it. So clearly, the intern who is friends who mans that page does not respond to direct messages. But be that as it may.
Okay.
Next question.
Anyway. Next question, and it is this is a goofy one. Who are the Knights of Ren?
Yeah, I love it if we have it, or a figure or something like that's the most frustrating thing for me about the toy line is Rise of Skywalker gave us the best candidate for a Black Series Palpatine I've ever seen. Give me zombie Cenobite Palpatine. I gotta have it. Give me. There's no reason that all of these guys aren't figures. Instead, we get one Knight of Ren, as if you could build a whole army of them. They all look different. And how many lightsabers are we talking about? In all the footage, we only see Kylo Ren's lightsaber. Who the hell are the Knights of Ren? What do they do? What's their training?
And this guy, does he not look like Cobra Commander with like a more BDSM look?
Yes, most of them do, actually.
Yeah. Like, this is the world's worst group of Cobra cosplayers.
Yeah. Who watched a little too many episodes of Mad Max.
Yes. Yeah. Thank you.
Oh my gosh, yes.
Yeah, that's a great picture, by the way. It's really indicative of everything that's wrong with that group. It's that they're dressed inappropriately. They look interesting, but they're not in the right environment, and
It's like that first game from Dodgeball where the uniforms get all mixed up and they get the wrong shipment. That's what this is. I want to throw a wrench at these guys. See if they can dodge that.
Yeah. I was very interested in the Knights of Ren until it became apparent we were not going to learn anything about them, and then I just kind of gave up. Well,
the coolest shot we ever get. The coolest shot we ever get of them is from Rise of Skywalker, where the camera's just doing that 360-degree pan while they're standing on that bluff. It's like, great. Okay, well, you've shown them. You've spent 90 seconds of film showing them just standing there doing absolutely zilch. Make them do something.
I think we can infer that they are I may be stating the obvious here, but we can infer that they are the students from Luke's academy that Kylo did not kill. But
I don't know, because the fact that they don't have, was there any indication when Ben at this point fights them on Exegol, is there any indication that any of them have any force sensitivity?
No, not a single one.
I think from what I understand, they were all followers. They were people who not necessarily had force sensitivity, but worshipped the Sith. They worshipped the dark side.
Like the dark side version of the Church of the Force or whatever it was.
They weren't like, they were just like, they worshipped Vader. They worshipped, particularly Vader. And honestly, I don't know if the word MacGuffin would be right, but they were just there as like a plot.
They're not a MacGuffin. They go back to that whole J.J. Abrams mystery box BS.
That reminds me, in the Simpsons episode where Homer goes to jail, there's a big burly thug playing the harmonica in the background, and Homer says, "What are you in for?" And the guy says, "Atmosphere." That's what they're there for. Yeah. They're there for the atmosphere.
Well, and they were also there. You build up this big group that's supposed to be big, tough. It's almost like if you look at Star Trek, you always use Worf as to show how bad the villain was. They had him beat up Worf. This is almost the opposite, to show how badass Kylo Ren is. You have this group of these supposedly badass fighters,
But
and Kylo takes them down.
We never hear a word about them, do we? Nobody even says they're good at anything.
Yeah, I don't know.
That's a frustrating question to me, Garrett. I'm mad at that question. I hate its guts. I would have liked to have seen a lot more about the Knights of Ren. I still would. I'd buy that comic book, but in the meantime, who knows?
Yeah, it's one of those things that it's a bad entry into canon because it goes unexplained. Again, this dials back to Chekhov's gun. They were introduced briefly in The Last Jedi, but we get no other reference other than that. It's not even a visual reference. We get to see a visual reference. No, I take that back. It was a visual reference to some degree because it had to do with I don't know. It's bad writing.
I do have one
fired off correctly.
Hey, Garrett, I have one question that's off topic. I've heard that phrase before, but as a writer, can you explain what is Chekhov's gun?
So we kind of talked about this a little bit ago before you came on the show. But Chekhov's gun is basically if you introduce some element within the story that needs to happen, it must happen by Act 3. So the gun reference is if there's a gun displayed in Act 1, it needs to be fired or it needs to go off in Act 3.
Okay.
And so if there's anything that is mentioned throughout the story, it has to be utilized at that point.
Okay.
So yeah. All right. So.
Oh wait, before we go, I did actually. I don't know if you saw the same thing I did, Garrett, but I did Google Knights of Ren history on Wikipedia, and it's just a picture of J.J. Abrams shrugging. So,
that makes sense. That makes sense. That's like his quintessential move is shrug. Like George Lucas is shaking his jowls and letting his third neck, jingle. J.J. Abrams shrugs. All right. Final question.
All right.
Why don't R2-D2 and Obi-Wan Kenobi recognize each other?
They do.
Yeah.
Yes. Obi-Wan never says Obi-Wan's exact words were, "I don't ever remember owning a droid," which he did not.
He never did. Yeah.
He never did own a droid.
That was Padme's
and Obi-Wan
droid.
And R2 was never his droid.
That is true. Yeah,
I hear this all the time.
Was owned by Anakin.
Yes.
And R2-D2.
The closest droid you could say that Obi-Wan owned was R5.
R2-D2 was owned by Padme because
Padme.
Droids, Anakin just had
but he was.
I only just heard that as I was re-listening to episode 3.
Yeah.
The novelization, but yeah, I think they did recognize each other. They went through some real trying times together, and I have personally met veterans who we served together. We did some dark stuff together, and when we hang out, we don't discuss it at all. Now, that's not to say that this also comes back to that George Lucas hadn't made that part up yet when Kenobi.
Yeah, there is that, but
I think this ties into a similar question of why didn't R2-D2 tell everybody all along that Darth Vader is Luke Skywalker's father, because R2-D2 is the only one who's seen the entire saga play out to that point.
And I got an answer for that. I just thought of this one because it wasn't his story to tell.
Have you ever heard the fan theory that R2-D2 is actually the narrator of those movies?
I have.
You know what? That would make sense. In fact, I was just going to say something along those lines.
Which would explain why R2-D2 is essentially invincible and everybody loves him, and
and why he's in every single movie.
Exactly, in almost every scene.
Yep, and
there's a few scenes that he's not, but no. To answer your question, it's because that wasn't his. The reason why he didn't tell Luke that Vader was his father was because that wasn't his place to tell.
I'd like to see a scene, a deleted scene where R2's about to tell Luke that, and Kenobi's like, "Oh, be cool, shut up." Not yet. Well, I actually had an unanswered question myself. There were one that when we first started, Mark, I bet $1, and I owe Garrett $1. that one of these unanswered questions was going to be pertaining to Darth Bane, because there's a moment at the conclusion of the Darth Bane trilogy of novels where Bane has been slain by his apprentice Xana.
Mm-hmm.
We know that Bane was researching essence transfer. We know that Bane had an injury to his hand, and at the conclusion of their battle, as he is dead, Xana has a little telltale twitch in her hand. It's not addressed, and it is taken by many to be an implication that Bane effected an essence transfer. Enough that Drew Karpyshyn actually publicly said, no, Bane died. It was just like a nice little nod. But my actual unanswered question is, was Finn ever stationed on the Supremacy? Because he says two conflicting things, and when people discuss like plot holes in The Last Jedi, I've never had anybody point out an actual plot hole to me. But this is one. When we hear about the tracking system that will track a ship through hyperspace, Finn has never heard of it. And then later, when we decide we're all going to infiltrate the Supremacy and sabotage it, Finn refers to himself as the guy who used to sweep up the floor around it. So, like, you remember the scene? He's like, who else do you want to bring? Like, who better to sabotage it? The guy who used to sweep up the floor around it. So
yeah, then this is the same guy who said, "Oh yeah, I was totally stationed on Starkiller Base, but he was the janitor."
Right. Well, he's in that line. He's saying he was the janitor, but he's stating pretty clearly that he used to clean that room that the device is in. And
yeah,
yet,
I'm
30 odd minutes prior,
I'm going to call bad writing on that one.
Yeah,
I blame Ryan Appleheaded Johnson on that, because yeah, that's just inconsistent.
Right.
Inconsistent.
Mark, do you have any questions that are unanswered that we haven't discussed?
I think we've covered quite a bit.
We have.
Even before I got on here, I can't think of any right now.
Have you guys ever heard the theory that Han Solo killed himself?
Yeah, I have.
Yeah.
I mean, it would make sense considering the fact that Harrison Ford hated the character.
Yeah.
It's one of my favorite fan theories. I haven't seen it in years, but it was one of my favorite fan theories, in that you don't often see a fan theory that is explicitly contradicted by canon material. But because in the novel it says Ren ignited the lightsaber.
Yeah.
But it was an interesting conversation when it was happening, because one stance was it was kind of a Professor Snape situation where Han killed himself so that Kylo Ren wouldn't become a patricide. And by the way, those of us on the dark side over here, we had high hopes for Kylo Ren killing his dad, because previously Darksiders who'd killed their fathers were Vitiate and Palpatine. So like there's a good tradition of powerful Darksiders who kill their dad, and nothing was made of it. And I think, Garrett, you may, I'm sure you're familiar with this as an author, but patricide has been an unforgivable sin since drama was a bunch of Greeks yelling through megaphones.
Oh yeah, it's a huge no-no.
But that kind of falls down in that if Han killed himself to prevent Kylo from becoming a patricide, to what end? Nobody's going to know that. Kylo's going to go tell his boss, I killed him anyway. Like, there's just no benefit to it. And but anyway, that was, for a while there, that was an unanswered question. Here's one. Was Jar Jar Binks intended to be a Sith Lord?
No.
Dear God, I hope not.
There's some weight to it. I think it would have been like if he does it.
Influenced by the dark side, yes. But
there's a few moments where like he makes a suggestion and he does like a little hand movement, and then what he suggests happens. He's got yellow eyes, and he is a gifted warrior. I mean, he's essentially a drunken master, right?
Dude, okay. Hold on. There's a difference between deliberately inebriating yourself because that's the style that your martial arts requires. But we're talking about the same dude who consistently stepped in feces and accidentally got his head stuck between the electric spanners between the engines of Anakin's pod racer and zapped his own brain.
I do not subscribe to the theory that Jar Jar Binks is a Sith Master, but I think they were going along those lines, albeit briefly.
Because as far as him being
sort of
a gifted warrior, we're talking like short bus gifted, not like Children of the Atom gifted. Okay.
I forget what it was, but years ago on an '80s sitcom, somebody's child was referred to as he's a special boy, and the mom says, special as in there is a special on dumbbells at the sporting goods store. I think it would be interesting. I personally like the Jar Jar as a Sith theory because it speaks to me what an effective villain Palpatine is. Because in my mind, a lot of fan theories around the time of the sequel trilogies coming out basically focused on taking power away from Palpatine. The number one of those is Snoke is Plagueis. Everyone's like, oh, Snoke is Plagueis, Snoke is Plagueis. Snoke is not Plagueis. Because if Snoke were Plagueis, that would mean that A, Plagueis is a coward who is killed and then goes into hiding for 30 years and watches his apprentice do what he was going to do, only to show up much, much later after his apprentice is dead. We know Plagueis to not be a coward. It also makes Palpatine a fool in that Palpatine can't tell living from dead at what is undeniably the most important part of his entire life, deciding whether Plagueis is dead. Now, whether he killed him in his sleep or suffocated him when he was drunk, whatever you subscribe to, whatever canon is, Sidious killing Plagueis and ascending to Sith Master is not the sort of thing one says, well, I hit him over the head and ran away, he's probably dead, right? So
but Palpatine's also the same guy who's like, hey, let me kill you with Force lightning and have it backfire on me twice.
Okay.
Not twice, 3 times. 3 times.
Pride is a bit of an issue with our guy. But I'm going to say, because I can find an angle on this for anywhere.
Oh, I'm sure you could.
That just means that's evidence that Palpatine is so powerful, the only thing that can kill Palpatine is Palpatine. Rey and Kylo don't kill him.
Turn the Emperor into the robot from The Incredibles.
Yes, exactly that. No, I hadn't thought of that, but I like it. I like where your head's at. And I am going to once again, just before we go, I sense you wrapping up, but I'm on a roll here. I have a theory, and Disney, if you're listening, here we go. It's the next big Pixar film. Palpatine, at the time of the Death Star 2's destruction, did execute a Force and essence transfer. He took his spirit out of that body into space. There was no viable option left, so he drifted bodiless down to the surface of Endor, where he possessed a local quadruped. And through a series of events, undertook an adventure, experienced character development, and hence how Palpatine got his groove back.
And on that note, we're just going to say next week we are doing our review of Return of the Jedi, Return of the Review Die. Bad pun there, but it's definitely better than.
You should feel ashamed of You should feel shame for that.
I should.
You should.
I don't think so. Classic. I'll take it.
Okay. So, Brian, how can people get a hold of you?
Get a hold of me on the Sith Library and Archives, a lovingly curated collection of Sith-related art, humor, and history. Out on Facebook on the Sith Library and Archives, I post as Darth Corrosis, one of the many admins out there. We do a fine job. And I'm proud to say I'm actually kind of back in the swing of things here. I took quite a bit of a hiatus when my child was born, and I realized it had been way too long. So I've been posting a few things here and there. And I have an ongoing lecture series of Sith culture and more. So come join us.
Very cool. As for me, you guys can get in contact with me on Instagram and X at GKJ_publishing, where I talk about my books. Speaking of which, I just had a new one come out as of today, February 17th. It's called Midnight Playground. It is a collection of short stories that I've been working on over the last couple of years, and I finally collated them into an anthology. I also talk about my show on YouTube called The Right Way, where we talk book recommendations, author interviews, and creative writing tips. I'm quickly coming up on my springtime author awareness April marathon, and that will be that'll be dropping on the first Saturday of April. And then I'm also on a new podcast on Feast of Fandoms called Snackame, where we eat snacks and we talk anime. It's a lot of fun.
Awesome. All right. As for us right here at War of the Stars, if you want to get a hold of us, you can do so through our email, warofthestars1@gmail.com, or you can get us on Instagram at war_of_the_stars1. On X, we are at War of the Stars 1, and on YouTube at WOTS 77. We are, of course, a proud member of Feast of Fandoms. Check out all the shows on Feast of Fandoms each week that come out. Bunch of really good shows there. Let's see. What else do we got? Ko-fi.com/War of the Stars if you want to support the show, or you can get the merch. Go to spreadshirt.com/shop/war-of-the-stars. As we said, yes, thanks for watching. Check us out next week as we talk about my favorite movie in the Star Wars canon, Return of the Jedi. Remember, this is not just my Star Wars. This is not just your Star Wars. This is our Star Wars. Until next week, may the Force be with you.